A buddy of mine who's in his mid-50s and he's been investing in single-family rentals for about 15 years. The other day he calls me up. He says, I keep getting invited to these real estate deals, syndications, private equity, LP positions. He says, I've got the money and I think I want to do it, but every time I get on a call with a sponsor, well, I kind of feel like I have no idea what anybody is talking about. And this is not a dumb guy. He built his very successful business from nothing, and he's made good financial decisions for his whole life. But the vocabulary in this world, things like waterfall, preferred return, capital call, K1, PPM, OM, well, nobody ever really walked him through any of that stuff and what it means. And much like many of us who've been successful, he's too proud to be on a call with 10 other investors. He just hangs up and his money just stays undeployed. Now, I've watched this happen to a lot of people. They've got the capital, they've got the intent, they just never have someone sit down with them and say, here's how the inside of all of these deals actually work, step by step in plain English. So that's what this video is. I'm going to walk you through exactly what happens when you invest in a private real estate deal as a passive investor, from the moment you first hear about the deal to the moment when your capital starts coming back to you in those distributions. Every step, every term defined as we go, no jargon left unexplained. But before we get into that, the standard disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. Nothing in this video is investment advice. This video is for education and entertainment purposes, and that's it. So here's the big picture. Private real estate investing means you're putting money into a real estate deal that is not, obviously, on the stock market. You can't buy it through your brokerage account, and it's not a REIT. It's a private deal run by an operator backed by a real property. You're going to come in as what's called a limited partner, or LP for short. And that means you're going to put in capital and someone else is going to do all the work, finding the deal, managing the property, handling the tenants, the accounting, executing the business plan. That all falls on the plate of the general partner, or as they're known, GP. Your job is pretty simple. Invest the money, read the updates, and then collect and cash your distribution checks. That's it. That's the entire structure in just 2 sentences. Now, let me tell you how I actually got started, because I think it will make the whole thing click, or at least I hope so. My neighbor Corey had started buying and managing mobile home parks years ago. My wife and I have known him for a number of years, maybe I think 5 years now. And we've watched him build this thing from the ground up into a very successful business. And I'd done enough of my own research to understand that mobile home parks, well, they're one of the more resilient asset classes in real estate. They tend to hold up well even during recessions because the demand for affordable housing doesn't go away when the economy gets soft. So when Corey offered us a chance to invest as limited partners in one of his parks, after doing our due diligence, we said yes, and we wired $25,000. Now, I want to be honest with you, even though it was not a huge amount, $25,000, I was still pretty nervous because I've made investment mistakes in the past. And I know what it feels like to put my money somewhere and then realize later on that, oh, I should have probably done more homework before I made that decision. So every time I make an investment decision, there's always a part of me that thinks, oh man, am I about to make a mistake? And I always pay attention to that. But here's what actually happened. The deal didn't just meet our expectations. Corey's a great operator, and it exceeded them by a wide margin. Corey and his team improved the park enough to refinance it ahead of schedule, and that allowed us to get about 77%, 77, 78, something like that, of our original investment back through that refinancing, while still keeping our entire full equity position in the deal, which means our remaining capital at risk dropped to basically about a quarter of what we originally invested. And better yet, our cash on cash yield went absolutely through the roof. So since this first deal, my wife and I have invested over the last 5 or 6 years in quite a few more mobile home parks with my neighbor Corey. They now represent probably maybe 10% or so of our net worth, and that started with a $25,000 check from a nervous guy, yours truly, who wasn't like 100% sure he was making the right decision, but heck, when are we ever 100% sure of anything? So next, I want to walk you through what that experience actually feels like once you're in, because I think this is the part that most people wish that somebody had explained before they ever wrote their first check. All right, first let's talk about the on-ramp. Before you invest in any private deal, you need to qualify, or most times you need to qualify depending upon the deal, as what's called an accredited investor. So there's two types of deals. There's 501Bs and 501Cs. The easy way to remember, B stands for buddy, C stands for community. So if you're already buddies with, you have a pre-established relationship with the general partner, you may not need to be an accredited investor. But if it's a 501C deal, that means it's available to be marketed to a community, and therefore the whole buddy relationship thing doesn't apply, and you are absolutely going to need to be an accredited investor. Now, to be an accredited investor, if you don't already know, you need to make $200,000 a year individually, or if you combine your income with your spouse, $300,000 a year. Or if you don't meet that threshold, your net worth, excluding the equity in your house, has to be at least $1 million or more. And of course, that can include the value of your business if you own one. So the actual process of investing is pretty simple, and it's much simpler than most people maybe who haven't done it before. You're going to review the deal documents. The main one is called the PPM, the Private Placement Memorandum. That's a mouthful. And it's basically the playbook for the entire deal. Then, if you want to proceed, you're going to sign a subscription agreement, and then you're going to wire your capital. And then the deal's going to close. And that's actually what I did right before I was recording this video, as I was wiring capital from some of my wife's retirement savings into a new fund that we are investing in. All of that's done, then the updates are going to start coming to you as a limited partner. So my buddy that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, he finally went through this process, and he told me it was really nothing compared to what his imagination had built it up to be. Turned out it was actually the vocabulary that was the barrier, not so much the process. Now, let's talk about how you get paid, because we all like getting paid. And most of what I'm about to say pertains to equity deals. Debt deals are a lot simpler than equity deals. As a matter of fact, the one that I just wired the money for was a debt deal. So we're going to talk about those separately. This part is important because once you see how the money flows, a lot of the other stuff is probably going to make a whole lot more sense to you. So here we go. In most private real estate deals, there is a payment order. It's called the Waterfall, and it's designed to protect you, the limited partner. So let me give you an example with real numbers. Let's say that you invest $100,000. So the deal includes what's called a preferred return. So let's say that's 8%, because that's pretty typical, sometimes 6, 7, 8, but we're going to go with 8 for this case. So that means $8,000 a year needs to flow to you before the people running the deal, the general partners, see $1 of profit. So in other words, you're first in line, hence the name preferred return. If the deal misses a payment in any given quarter, those missed payments, well, they're going to stack up. They have to be caught up to you before the GP gets anything. Once the preferred return is covered, what's left gets split. And it's typically something like 70% to investors and 30% to operators. So if it was a preferred return, somebody might use slang, call it an 8 pref with a 70-30. If it was a 9% preferred return, it was a 90-10, they'd call it a 9 pref with a 90-10. So when the property eventually sells, the same order that I just described applies. Your original capital comes back first, then any unpaid preferred return, then the profit split kicks in. So the people who are running the deal, they only ever earn their big payday after you've been made whole. They make money when you make money, and that's the whole point of the GP-LP structure. So now let's talk about what the first couple of years feel like as a limited partner. Year one, well, I'm going to call that the patience year. So you're going to get access to an investor portal. Your first investor update probably within 30 days of closing. And if you're in what's called a value-added deal, which many equity deals are, that's where the operator is renovating the property to increase rents. So distributions can take 3 to 6 months to start, and that's normal. That's the business plan doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Now, I'll tell you what I did during year one of my first deal. I checked the investor portal probably more than I needed to do. And as I quickly realized, there's not much to see in the early months of an equity deal. Debt deals are different. You're going to get updates, you read them, and then you wait. It takes some discipline to just let the operators do their job, but that's kind of the whole point of being a passive investor. They're doing their job so you can be free to do yours. So you're not supposed to be involved in the day-to-day. Your job is pretty much to evaluate lead sponsors, make a decision to invest, and then stand back and let the GP execute the deal. Now, year number 2 is where you find, for lack of a better term, you find your rhythm. So distributions now are coming to you regularly. That's the fun part. If it's a value-added deal, you're probably seeing rents climbing. And when that happens, your cash-on-cash return is probably approaching the target that you read about in that PPM before you ever decided to invest in this deal. You're starting to understand the updates intuitively. You don't need to look up every term anymore. And this is typically when most LPs start looking at their next investment. You've seen how the first one works, the mystery is gone, and now you're thinking about where to put that next check. That brings us to year 3, which is the decision year. In year 3, to be honest, it'll be described in the PPM. It could be year 3 or 4 or 5. It really depends on what the original business plan was. But whatever that is, the operator starts exploring exit options. They might sell the property, or they might refinance it and return a chunk of your capital while keeping your equity position. And that's what happened on our first deal with Corey. Or they might hold and keep distributing income. If they sell, the waterfall that I described earlier kicks in. Your capital comes back first. Preferred return gets settled. Then profits are split. The total cash you receive divided by the total cash you've invested is called the equity multiple. A 2x equity multiple means, you guessed it, you doubled your money over the life of the deal. So year 1, you're learning. Year 2, you've got the hang of it. By year 3, you know what you're doing, and you're ready potentially to put more capital to work. That's kind of the arc. That's how it works. And once you've been through it once, the next deal feels completely different. The fear and all that nervousness that I described is gone. At that point, you're just making capital allocation decisions. And remember, this is the timeline for an equity deal. If you're investing in a debt fund, none of this long timeline that I just described applies. Instead, you start receiving monthly checks almost immediately, and they keep on coming month after month after month. And I actually have a video that describes debt funds in a ton more detail. So rather than make this video extra long, just look for a link down in the description and you can watch that video. And even though I've invested in plenty of equity deals in the past, these days I do have to admit that I'm really keen on debt funds for a variety of reasons that I've explained in other videos. And again, that one down that's going to be linked down below. So make sure that you watch that video right after this one, because if you're kind of like me and you really are wanting to avoid losses at all costs while still getting great returns, you're probably going to like debt funds as well. We've now covered what it looks like when it works. Now let me tell you something that's super important for you to understand before you ever make your first investment as a passive investor. First, your money is probably going to be locked up. These are, generally speaking, not liquid investments. You cannot log in and move your money whenever you want. Depending upon the deal, your capital could be committed for somewhere between 3 and 7 years. That's pretty typical. So there's no app where you can just go on and sell your position. So that means this is not the right place for money that you're going to need in the next couple of years. Now, if you have a shorter term horizon, again, a debt fund might be a better way for you to go, but I'm going to leave that for another video. So I'd argue, though, that this lockup period, well, it's actually more of a feature than a bug. And here's why. Most investors don't lose money necessarily by picking bad investments. Instead, they lose money by panicking and selling at the wrong time. I've done it. Maybe you've done it as well. So when your money is locked up into a long-term investment, you literally can't make that mistake. The structure of the deal forces the patience, and it makes you the rational investor that every financial book tells you that you're supposed to be. But you need to know that going in so that you don't have any surprises. Now, second, the operator matters more than the deal. A great operator with an average property will still figure out how to break even at least or make you some money. On the other hand, a bad operator with a really great property, well, they'll still figure out a way to lose your money. So the single most important due diligence you can do is to evaluate the person or the team that's managing the deal. How long have they been doing this? How many deals have they done? What's their historical performance numbers? You get the idea. You want to know their track record. With Corey, I had the advantage of knowing him personally. So most of the time, you probably won't have that advantage. So you do need to do the homework. And I've got a whole video coming on exact due diligence processes that I use and before I invest in any deal. And when that video is ready, if you're on my email list, you'll get an email and then you'll be able to watch it. But the short version is this. If a sponsor makes due diligence difficult in any way, shape, or form, that tells you everything you need to know about that sponsor, and you should grab your checkbook and run in the other direction. And finally, number 3, taxes are different than what you're used to. You're going to receive a form called a K-1 every year, and it reports your share of the deal's income and deductions. The tax treatment can actually be quite favorable, but it's also more complex than a standard brokerage statement. And I'm not going to turn this video into a tax tutorial. I've got a separate video planned for that. But what I'll tell you is this. You need a CPA who understands partnership tax returns and alternative investments. If your CPA doesn't, I highly recommend that you find a CPA that does. Now, quick question for you before we wrap up. Please drop a comment and tell me what's been the biggest thing holding you back from investing passively in real estate. Is it the vocabulary that I talked about earlier? Is it the minimums? Or is it not knowing who to trust or how to find the deals? I want to know this stuff because the information helps me plan for what topics I should cover in future videos. Thank you for doing that. All right, so let me leave you with one thing. If any of what I said today resonated with you, if you've been sitting on capital because the world of alternative investments felt too complicated or too opaque, I want you to do just one simple thing this week. Call your CPA, ask them one simple question. Do you have experience with K-1s from real estate partnerships? If they say yes, great, you've got the CPA you want. If they say no or they hesitate, well, again, like I said before, I think you should find a CPA that is familiar with this stuff, because the right CPA is the first team member you need before you invest a dollar in this space. Not a financial advisor, not a broker, a CPA that speaks and understands this language. That's step 1, and it costs you pretty much nothing, and it really won't take very long at all, and it puts you closer to being ready than 90% of the people who maybe have been thinking about this stuff for years, but have never really pulled the trigger or done anything. So if you want to go deeper, I put out a video a week here on passive investing, alternative assets, how to navigate what's happening in the AI economy, and so forth. And the way that you get access to that is you can subscribe right here on YouTube so you don't miss any of the videos when they come out. And maybe even more importantly, I recommend that you go head on over to my website, Invest with Trent, where you're going to learn about the specific types of deals that my wife and I are investing in, and you'll be able to join the email list. And when you do, you'll get what I basically call it's just a series of emails to help educate you so that you'll better understand all of this stuff. So my name is Trent. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please do smash the like button, and I look forward to seeing you back again in another video soon. Take care. Bye-bye.